Commander Vex straightened his purple uniform and activated the holographic display with the kind of smugness only a three-eyed, tentacled military instructor could muster. The lecture hall buzzed with the typical pre-class chatter of young alien cadets who thought they knew everything about warfare because they'd played a few battle simulations. "Settle down, future galactic defenders," Vex announced, his voice carrying that special blend of authority and condescension that made cadets simultaneously respect and resent him. "Today we begin our study of primitive warfare systems, focusing on a particularly entertaining species from the Sol system: humans." A ripple of snickers ran through the classroom. In the front row, Zark leaned back in his reinforced chair, his scaled green hide glistening under the artificial lights. The reptilian cadet was built like a tank with anger management issues, and his species had conquered half their solar system before they'd even invented proper spaceflight. "Oh great, another lecture about some backwards planet full of furless apes," he muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. Behind him, Pip's compound eyes darted nervously between her fellow students. The insectoid cadet's chitinous exoskeleton always seemed to click when she was anxious, which was approximately 97% of the time. Her species had achieved galactic travel through sheer mathematical brilliance, not military conquest, and every warfare class made her question her career choices. "Actually," interrupted Glub from his specialized moisture tank in the corner, "humans are quite fascinating from an evolutionary standpoint." The amphibian's webbed fingers typed rapidly on his waterproof datapad. "They're one of the few species to achieve technological advancement while maintaining active tribal warfare patterns. Most curious." Floating near the ceiling, Flux pulsed with shifting colors of pure energy, occasionally coalescing into a vaguely humanoid shape. "Please tell me we're not spending another semester watching primitive creatures throw rocks at each other," the energeti being complained, his voice crackling like controlled lightning. "My species transcended physical form 3 millennia ago. This is beneath us." Commander Vex's central eye fixed on Flux with the kind of stare that had made countless cadets reconsider their life choices. "Cadet Flux, your species may have transcended physical form, but you still haven't transcended the need to pass this class. And Cadet Zark, I assure you these furless apes will provide more entertainment than you expect." Zark crossed his muscular arms and smirked. "Commander, my people conquered our entire continent using nothing but claws and superior intellect. What could possibly be impressive about a species that hasn't even left their own star system?" "Excellent question," Vex replied, his tentacles writhing with what might have been amusement. "Let me start with something gentle. A conflict they called World War I. Pay attention to their innovation in battlefield tactics." The holographic display shimmered to life, showing grainy black and white footage of what looked like organized chaos. Muddy trenches stretched across a wasteland punctuated by shell craters and the occasional explosion. "Now this should be good," Zark whispered to his seatmate. "Look at them hiding in holes in the ground like some kind of burrowing rodents." But as the footage continued, showing waves of soldiers charging across no man's land into machine gun fire, only to be followed by more waves doing exactly the same thing, the classroom grew quieter. Pip's clicking increased dramatically. "Commander, why do they keep running toward the weapons that are clearly designed to kill them?" "Because, Cadet Pip, humans have this fascinating concept called duty. They'll charge into certain death if someone in authority tells them it's necessary." Vex paused the footage on an image of soldiers wearing primitive gas masks. "They also have a remarkable talent for making warfare more efficient. When conventional weapons weren't killing each other fast enough, they invented chemical warfare." The classroom fell completely silent. "Chemical warfare?" Pip's voice cracked like breaking glass. "You mean they deliberately poisoned each other's air?" Commander Vex nodded, clearly enjoying the cadet's growing discomfort. "Oh, this is just the beginning. Watch this delightful footage from the Battle of the Somme." The hologram shifted to show soldiers stumbling through yellow-green clouds, clawing at their throats and eyes. Some collapsed immediately. Others ran screaming before falling face first into the mud. The camera panned across a field littered with bodies, then cut to soldiers in trenches casually loading artillery shells marked with skull symbols. Zark's confident smirk faltered. "Okay, that's actually pretty hardcore for a primitive species, but surely this was their most extreme conflict, right?" "Oh, my dear scaled friend," Vex chuckled, his tentacles practically dancing with glee. "This was just their warm-up act. Humans call this the war to end all wars. Spoiler alert, it didn't end any wars. They had an even bigger one 20 years later." Glub's webbed fingers stopped typing. "Commander, The mathematics don't add up. If this conflict was so devastating, basic survival instincts should have prevented them from engaging in larger-scale warfare for at least several generations. You'd think so, wouldn't you? Vex switched to footage of massive artillery bombardments. But humans have this wonderful quirk. They learn from their mistakes by making bigger, more creative mistakes. Watch how they improved their efficiency. The display showed endless lines of soldiers marching over the top of trenches, only to be cut down by machine gun fire. Then more soldiers. Then more. The casualty numbers appeared in the corner of the screen. 60,000 British casualties on the first day alone. Pip started making a sound that could only be described as mechanical hyperventilation. 60,000. In one day. Commander, my entire species numbers only 40 million total. These humans lost more soldiers in a single day than my people produce in a decade. And the truly beautiful part, Vex continued with the enthusiasm of a sports commentator, is that both sides kept doing this for 4 years straight. They'd charge across the same patch of mud, die horribly, then their replacements would charge across the same patch of mud the next day. Flux's energy form flickered rapidly between colors. This makes no tactical sense whatsoever. Any rational species would have developed more efficient warfare methods or negotiated peace. But that's where you're wrong, Cadet Flux. Vex zoomed in on soldiers wearing early flamethrowers. They did develop more efficient methods. When machine guns weren't killing fast enough, they invented portable fire weapons. When poison gas wasn't spreading far enough, they improved the delivery systems. When artillery wasn't accurate enough, they developed better targeting. The footage showed a flamethrower team advancing through a trench, and even Zark visibly flinched as enemy soldiers emerged from bunkers completely engulfed in flames. "Commander," Pip whispered, her exoskeleton now clicking so rapidly it sounded like maracas in a hurricane. "Are you telling us that humans responded to a weapon being too effective by making it more effective?" "Exactly. Most species hit a certain level of destructive capability and think, perhaps we should reconsider this approach. Humans hit that same level and think, how can we make this worse for the other guy?" Zark tried to maintain his bravado, but his tail was twitching nervously. "Okay, so they had one really brutal war. Big deal. My species had brutal wars too. The key word being had. Past tense. Surely they learned their lesson." Commander Vex's 3 eyes practically sparkled with malicious joy. Oh, Cadet Zark. Sweet, naive Cadet Zark. This war ended in 1918. By 1939, they'd started an even bigger one, and this time they'd spent 20 years thinking about how to improve their killing methods. The hologram flickered to a new scene. Formations of aircraft dropping bombs on cities while massive tank formations rolled across landscapes that looked like the surface of a dead moon. Pip stood up abruptly, her chair clattering backward. "Commander, I think I need to visit the medical bay. I'm experiencing what my species calls existential crisis nausea." "Sit down, Cadet. We haven't even gotten to the interesting part yet." Pip reluctantly sat back down, though her compound eyes remained fixed on the nearest exit like a prisoner planning an escape route. "Now then," Commander Vex continued cheerfully, "let me introduce you to what humans call World War II. They managed to involve 61 nations this time and killed roughly 75 million people. But the real innovation was in their methodology. The hologram displayed a map of Europe with arrows indicating rapid military movements. They called this strategy Blitzkrieg, which literally translates to lightning war. Watch how they coordinated aircraft, tanks, and infantry to completely overwhelm their enemies before they could respond. The footage showed German panzer divisions rolling through European countryside like an unstoppable mechanical tide, while Stuka dive bombers screamed overhead and infantry advanced in perfect coordination. Zark leaned forward despite himself. "Okay, I have to admit, that's actually impressive tactical coordination. My species took 3 centuries to develop combined arms tactics." "Oh, it gets better," Vex replied with the glee of a child showing off his favorite toy. "Watch this footage from something called D-Day. They decided to invade a continent by landing on the most heavily fortified beaches they could find. The hologram switched to scenes of thousands of landing craft approaching Norman beaches, while artillery shells exploded around them like deadly fireworks. Soldiers poured out of the craft into machine gun fire, and yet more kept coming. Glub's datapad was working overtime. "Commander, my calculations indicate a 67% casualty rate for the first wave. Why didn't they abort the landing?" Because, my amphibious friend, humans have this concept called determination that borders on clinical insanity. When Plan A fails, they don't retreat, they send more humans. The footage continued, showing wave after wave of Allied soldiers storming the beaches, climbing over their own dead to establish footholds. Meanwhile, paratroopers were dropping behind enemy lines in what looked like organized suicide missions. Flux's energy form was pulsing an alarm shade of orange. This is completely irrational. Any logical species would have developed long-range bombardment capabilities to avoid direct confrontation. Oh, they had those too, Vex said casually. Watch this delightful footage from the Pacific Theater. The display shifted to show massive naval battles with ships the size of small cities firing guns that could level buildings. Then came footage of island-hopping campaigns, where humans fought over patches of coral and sand, with the desperation of people fighting over the last water source in a desert. The truly beautiful part, Vex narrated, as Marines fought through jungle terrain against an enemy that had turned every tree and cave into a fortress, is that both sides refused to surrender. Japanese soldiers would rather die than be captured. American soldiers kept advancing, even when facing certain death. Pip was now clicking so fast she sounded like a broken percussion section. Commander, this is madness. These humans are fighting like cornered animals, but they're doing it voluntarily. Ah, but we're just getting to the best part, Vex said, rubbing his tentacles together. Humans discovered that the very atoms that make up matter could be split to release energy. The hologram showed scientists in laboratory coats, working with complex equipment, followed by footage of a test detonation in a desert. The mushroom cloud rose majestically into the sky, while the narrator's voice calmly explained the physics of nuclear fission. Zark's jaw dropped so far his tongue almost hit the floor. They weaponized atomic structure itself? Not only that, Vex continued, clearly enjoying himself. They built 2 different types just to see which one worked better. Then they dropped them both on enemy cities to end the war. The footage from Hiroshima and Nagasaki left the entire classroom in stunned silence. Buildings vaporized, shadows burned into walls where people had been standing, survivors with burns covering their bodies, wandering through devastated cityscapes. Glubb stopped typing entirely and just stared at his calculations. Commander, the energy release from a single device, my people's entire civilization couldn't generate that much power if we tried. And yet, Vex said with a dramatic pause, humans built dozens of these weapons within a few years. Then they built bigger ones. Then they pointed them at each other for the next 50 years in what they called a Cold War. Pip suddenly stood up again, but this time she was reaching into her uniform pocket. That's it. I'm done. Finished. Through. She pulled out an official withdrawal form that was already half filled out. Commander, I'm officially requesting immediate transfer to the Galactic Agriculture Academy. Takeda, you can't just quit in the middle of a lesson. Watch me. Pip's exoskeleton was rattling now. Any species that responds to discovering unlimited energy by immediately figuring out how to use it to kill more efficiently is not something I want to study. I'd rather spend my life learning about peaceful farming techniques from herbivorous civilizations. She marched toward the door, pausing only to address her fellow cadets. Anyone with half a brain cell should join me. We're studying a species that treats warfare like an art form. The door slid shut behind her with a definitive swoosh, leaving the remaining cadets staring at each other in uncomfortable silence. Commander Vex cleared his throat, though his confidence seemed slightly shaken for the first time. Well then, anyone else feeling overwhelmed by human innovation? Because we haven't even covered modern warfare yet. Zark raised a trembling claw. Commander, just out of curiosity, what do you mean by modern warfare? Commander Vex's tentacles twitched nervously as he brought up the next set of files. For the first time since the lecture began, he seemed less like an enthusiastic teacher and more like someone who'd accidentally opened a door he wasn't sure he could close. Well, Cadet Zark, after humans finished their second global conflict, most rational species would have said, perhaps we've taken this warfare thing too far. Humans, however, said, how can we make this more complicated? The hologram flickered to life, showing jungle scenes from Vietnam. Soldiers in camouflage moved through dense vegetation, while helicopters thundered overhead, their rotors chopping through humid air thick with smoke and tension. This is what they call asymmetric warfare, Vex explained, his voice losing some of its earlier enthusiasm. One side has superior technology and firepower. The other side has intimate knowledge of the terrain and unlimited patience. Watch what happens when humans fight an enemy that refuses to line up in neat formations to be shot. The footage showed American soldiers trudging through rice paddies, constantly scanning for threats that could come from anywhere. Then came scenes of elaborate tunnel systems dug by hand, extending for miles underground, complete with hospitals, workshops, and command centers. Glub's amphibious head popped up from his tank with renewed interest. Fascinating. The indigenous forces essentially turned their entire country into a three-dimensional battlefield. Every tree, every building, every hole in the ground became a potential weapons platform. Exactly, Vex nodded grimly. But here's where it gets truly disturbing. Watch how humans adapted to fighting an invisible enemy. The display shifted to show soldiers using flamethrowers to clear vegetation, followed by massive aircraft dropping napalm that turned entire forests into infernos. Then came footage of helicopters spraying chemicals that stripped leaves from trees across vast areas. I decided if they couldn't see their enemies hiding in the jungle, Vex continued, they'd simply remove the jungle with fire and poison. Lots of poison. Zark's confidence had completely evaporated. His scales had shifted to a pale green that indicated deep distress in his species. Commander, they poisoned their own planet's vegetation just to get a tactical advantage? Oh, that's nothing, Vex replied, pulling up new footage. Let me show you what they did in urban environments. The hologram displayed scenes from various Middle Eastern conflicts. Soldiers moved through city streets where every window could hide a sniper, every doorway could conceal an explosive device, and every civilian could be either an innocent bystander or a combatant. Urban warfare, Vex explained, where humans learn to fight in 3 dimensions while trying to minimize civilian casualties. Watch how they clear buildings. The footage showed soldiers methodically moving room by room through structures, using specialized equipment to see through walls, robots to defuse explosives, and coordinated tactics that would make a chess master weep with admiration. Flux's energy form was now pulsing a deep red that indicated severe agitation. This is insane. They've turned their own cities into battlefields and developed an entire science around fighting in them. It gets worse, Vex said, his enthusiasm completely gone now. Humans discovered that the most effective weapon isn't always the biggest gun. Sometimes it's information. The display showed what looked like perfectly normal humans sitting at computers in ordinary offices. Then came footage of power grids failing, communication networks going dark, and financial systems collapsing without a single shot being fired. Cyber warfare, Vex explained quietly. They can now cripple entire civilizations by attacking their information infrastructure. No explosions, no radiation, no chemical weapons. Just humans with computers, turning modern society against itself. Glub was frantically taking notes, his scientific mind both horrified and fascinated. Commander, according to my research, humans have been in a continuous state of armed conflict somewhere on their planet for their entire recorded history. They haven't had a single year of complete global peace in over 3,000 years. That's correct, Cadet Gloob. While most species developed space travel as a way to find new resources and reduce competition, humans developed space travel while still actively fighting each other over their original planet. Zark stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. You're telling me that right now, as we sit here studying them like some kind of academic curiosity, they're still fighting? Multiple conflicts across several continents, Vex confirmed. And they've gotten very, very good at it. Watch this footage from their recent special operations. The hologram showed night vision footage of small teams of soldiers moving with impossible stealth through enemy territory. They appeared and disappeared like ghosts, struck with surgical precision, and vanished before anyone knew they'd been there. These are what they call special forces, Vex narrated. They select the most physically and mentally capable humans, then train them beyond what most species would consider the breaking point of sanity. These individuals can survive in any environment, speak multiple languages, and operate independently behind enemy lines for extended periods. The footage showed Navy SEALs emerging from water like some kind of amphibious nightmare, Army Rangers fast roping from helicopters into hostile territory, and Delta Force operators moving through urban environments with the fluid precision of a deadly dance. Commander, Flux said, his voice crackling with barely controlled panic, these humans have specialized warriors who train specifically to be better at killing than their already terrifying regular military? Oh yes. And they volunteer for it. No conscription, no coercion. They compete for the privilege of undergoing training that has a failure rate higher than most species' mortality rates. The footage shifted to training montages, showing candidates carrying massive weights through obstacle courses, enduring sleep deprivation, surviving in hostile environments with minimal equipment, and learning to operate every weapon system in their arsenal with expert proficiency. Zark slowly sank back into his chair, his warrior pride completely demolished. My species considers itself the ultimate predator. We conquered our homeworld through superior physical prowess and tactical thinking. But these humans, they've turned warfare into a science, an art form, and a way of life all at the same time. And the truly terrifying part, Vex added, consulting his notes with shaking tentacles, is that they consider most of their conflicts to be limited engagements or police actions. What they call total war, he paused, staring at the data. What they call total war makes everything we've seen so far look like a playground disagreement. A soft chime indicated that more cadets were submitting withdrawal forms electronically. Vex's communicator showed 17 new requests for transfer to non-military academic programs. Glub raised a webbed hand tentatively. Commander, perhaps we should consider the possibility that humans aren't actually a primitive species suitable for academic study. Perhaps they're something else entirely. Commander Vex stared at his remaining cadets with the expression of someone who'd started juggling hand grenades as a party trick and suddenly realized he couldn't stop. Only 12 students remained in what had started as a class of 47. The others had either officially withdrawn or simply fled the building entirely. You know what, Cadet Glub? You're absolutely right. I think we've been approaching this all wrong, Vex said, his tentacles nervously coiling around his datapad. Let me show you something that might put this in proper perspective. The hologram activated to show what appeared to be completely ordinary humans in casual clothing, walking through a marketplace in some nondescript city. They looked relaxed, almost bored, like tourists shopping for souvenirs. These are undercover operatives from various human intelligence agencies, Vex explained. Watch carefully. The scene continued for several minutes with nothing happening. Then, almost imperceptibly, the humans began to move. Not running, not fighting, just repositioning. Within 30 seconds, 3 high-value targets had been neutralized, 2 had been captured alive, and the rest of the team had vanished into the crowd as if they'd never existed at all. The entire operation took 4 minutes and 37 seconds, Vex noted. Local security forces didn't even realize anything had happened until they found the targets. Zark's tail was now tucked firmly between his legs, a position of complete submission in his species. Commander, those humans just conducted a precision military operation in the middle of a civilian population without anyone noticing. My people would need weeks of planning and dozens of warriors to accomplish something like that. Oh, that's child's play compared to what I'm about to show you, Vex replied, and for the first time, his voice carried a note of genuine fear. Let me introduce you to what humans call their Tier 1 operators. The display shifted to show grainy night vision footage of what looked like a fortress compound surrounded by high walls and guard towers. Dozens of armed sentries patrolled the perimeter, and thermal imaging showed at least 200 defenders inside the complex. This is footage from a raid conducted by a unit humans called Devru, also known as SEAL Team 6. The target was a high-priority individual hiding in what his organization considered an impregnable stronghold. The footage showed 6 helicopters approaching under cover of darkness. Then everything happened at once. The first helicopter deposited a small team on the roof while the others provided overwatch. Within minutes, the entire compound had been secured. Wait, Flux interrupted, his energy form flickering rapidly between colors. How many humans were involved in this operation? 24 operators, plus helicopter crews, Vex replied. They neutralized over 200 defenders, secured the entire compound, collected intelligence, and extracted their primary target in under 40 minutes. The footage continued, showing the methodical room-by-room clearing of the entire complex. The human operators moved like they were performing a choreographed dance, each one knowing exactly where the others would be at every moment. They communicated through hand signals and advanced tactical coordination that would make a hive mind jealous. Glub was frantically calculating on his datapad. The efficiency ratio is completely impossible. 24 individuals shouldn't be able to defeat 10 times their number in a fortified position. The mathematics don't work. The mathematics work perfectly, Vex said grimly, if you factor in training, equipment, and the simple fact that these humans have been selected and conditioned to be the ultimate expression of their species' combat capabilities. The hologram switched to training footage showing candidates undergoing what could only be described as systematic torture disguised as preparation. Humans were subjected to freezing water, sleep deprivation, physical exhaustion beyond normal endurance limits, and psychological pressure that broke most candidates within days. This is called Hell Week, Vex narrated. It's just one phase of a selection process that takes years to complete. The failure rate is approximately 80%, and those who fail are already considered elite by most galactic standards. The footage showed candidates carrying telephone poles through surf while instructors screamed at them, then running for miles in soggy boots, then performing complex problem-solving exercises while hypothermic and exhausted. Many candidates simply rang a bell and quit. Others collapsed and were carried away by medical teams. "Commander," Pip's voice came through the classroom intercom system from wherever she'd fled to. "Are you seriously telling us that humans voluntarily subject themselves to torture to earn the right to be sent on missions where they'll probably die?" "Not probably, Cadet Pip. Certainly. These operators have a life expectancy significantly lower than human civilian populations. And there's a waiting list of volunteers." Zark made a sound that could only be described as a whimper. "They compete for the privilege of dying young in violent ways?" The display shifted to show mission briefings where calm, professional humans discussed operations in places with names like Fallujah, Mogadishu, and Abbottabad. They spoke about eliminating targets, gathering intelligence, and conducting direct action missions, with the same casual tone most species use to discuss lunch menus. "Here's what really should terrify you," Vex continued, his voice now barely above a whisper. "Everything we've seen, every conflict, every weapon system, every tactical innovation, humans consider this to be restrained, civilized warfare." Flux's energy form suddenly condensed into a tight, panicked ball. "What do you mean, restrained?" "I mean, they have rules, codes of conduct, international laws governing how they're allowed to kill each other. They deliberately limit their own effectiveness because they're concerned about being too brutal." The classroom fell silent, except for the sound of more electronic withdrawal forms being submitted. Vex's communicator now showed 31 transfer requests. "They have weapons they won't use because they consider them inhumane," Vex continued. "Tactics they won't employ because they're too effective. Entire categories of warfare they've banned by mutual agreement because they're too horrible, even by human standards." Glubb slowly raised his hand. "Commander, what happens if they ever decide to remove those restrictions?" Vex stared at his datapad for a long moment. "According to the classified files I probably shouldn't be showing you, human military doctrine includes something called total war. It's a theoretical framework they've developed but never fully implemented." "What does it involve?" Zark asked, though his voice suggested he really didn't want to know. "Complete mobilization of all resources, suspension of all humanitarian restrictions, and the systematic elimination of the enemy's capacity to resist by any means necessary," Vex read directly from his files. "The last time they came close to implementing total war, they ended up splitting atoms and dropping the results on cities." Flux's panicked energy ball began to pulse erratically. "And that was them holding back? That was them ending the conflict quickly to avoid having to show what total war actually looks like." The remaining cadets stared at each other in horror. Finally, Zark stood up and walked toward the door. "Commander, I've spent my entire life believing my species were the ultimate warriors in the galaxy. We have claws, armor plating, superior strength, and centuries of martial tradition." He paused at the doorway. "These humans fight with their brains, and they're so good at it that they have to make rules to stop themselves from being too efficient at killing." "Where are you going, Cadet?" "To submit my application for the Galactic Peace Corps. If humans ever achieve faster-than-light travel, I want to be on the diplomatic team that makes sure they like us." The door closed behind him, leaving only 3 cadets in the classroom. Commander Vex looked at his class roster, then at the handful of remaining students. Anyone else feeling like a career change? The 3 remaining cadets looked around the now cavernous lecture hall that had once buzzed with the confident chatter of future galactic military officers. Glubb sat quietly in his moisture tank, occasionally typing notes with the dedication of a scholar documenting the end of civilization. Flux hovered near the ceiling in a tight, dim ball of energy that pulsed occasionally with what could only be described as existential dread. A 3rd cadet, Q, whom nobody had paid much attention to before, sat perfectly still in the back row with the 1,000-yard stare of someone who'd seen too much. Commander Vex surveyed his decimated classroom and tried to salvage what remained of his teaching career. "Well then, perhaps we should call it a day. We can resume tomorrow with a nice, safe lesson about the peaceful trading practices of the Zephian Collective." "Commander," Glubb said quietly, not looking up from his calculations, "I don't think any of us will be sleeping tonight. Do you mind if I ask you something?" "At this point, Cadet Glubb, I'm not sure there's anything left that could make this worse." Glubb's webbed fingers hesitated over his datapad. "In all your research on human warfare capabilities, did you happen to investigate their space program?" Vex's tentacles froze. A look of dawning horror spread across his features as he accessed a new file on his computer. Oh no. Oh no, 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 no! What is it, Commander? Flux managed to ask, his energy form flickering with renewed anxiety. I may have made a tiny error in my research methodology, Vex said, his voice cracking. I've been studying historical human conflicts, but I neglected to check their current technological development status. The holographic display activated automatically, showing a news feed from Earth dated just 3 days ago. The headline read, "Breakthrough in faster-than-light propulsion. First successful test of Alcubierre drive ability. Prototype." The classroom fell so silent that the hum of the ventilation system sounded like a roaring wind. Mystery. They achieved faster-than-light travel, Flux whispered. The species that treats warfare like performance art just figured out how to travel between star systems. Glub was typing furiously, accessing galactic databases and cross-referencing human technological development with their military history. Commander, according to this data, humans developed spaceflight while actively fighting a global war. They put satellites in orbit during armed conflicts. They established space stations while engaged in proxy wars across multiple continents. It gets worse, Vex said, pulling up more recent files. Look at this. The display showed footage from something called the International Space Station, where astronauts from nations that had been shooting at each other just decades earlier worked together on scientific experiments. Then came footage of Mars rovers, Jupiter probes, and telescope arrays that could see to the edge of their solar system. They're exploring their solar system while simultaneously perfecting the art of killing each other. QX spoke for the first time since the lecture began, his voice hollow with disbelief. They've achieved interplanetary travel and faster-than-light capability while never stopping their wars. Commander Vex accessed his communications array and began frantically typing messages. I need to contact the Galactic Defense Council immediately. This changes everything. What are you going to tell them? Glub asked. That we'd been studying the wrong species entirely. We thought we were analyzing primitive warfare techniques from a backward planet. Instead, we've been documenting the military capabilities of a species that's about to join galactic civilization. Flux's energy form began to pulse rapidly. Commander, what do you think happens when a species that spent 3,000 years perfecting warfare suddenly gains access to interstellar travel? Before Vex could answer, his communication system chimed with an incoming priority message from Galactic Defense Command. The hologram displayed Admiral Zorth, a massive crystalline being whose species had dominated military thinking for the past millennium. Commander Vex, the Admiral's voice resonated through the classroom. We've been monitoring your lecture through standard educational oversight protocols. Are you seriously telling us that this human species has achieved FTL capability? Yes, Admiral, as of 72 hours ago according to intercepted transmissions. And they're still actively engaged in armed conflicts on their homeworld. Multiple conflicts across several continents, Admiral. They appear to consider warfare and space exploration to be completely compatible activities. There was a long pause during which the only sound was the faint crackling of the Admiral's crystalline form processing information at light speed. Commander, we're immediately upgrading this course from academic study of primitive warfare to strategic threat assessment, species human. Furthermore, we're establishing a new department, diplomatic relations with militaristic civilizations. Admiral, there's something else, Vex said hesitantly. According to their own military doctrine, everything they've done so far represents restrained, limited engagement warfare. They have theoretical frameworks for something called total war that they've never fully implemented. The silence from Admiral Zorth lasted so long that Vex wondered if the transmission had been cut. Commander, are you telling me that this species has been holding back? Yes, Admiral. They have international laws specifically designed to prevent themselves from being too efficient at warfare. And now they have faster-than-light travel. Yes, Admiral. Another long pause. Commander Vex, I'm authorizing you to immediately begin development of a new curriculum, Introduction to Human Diplomatic Relations, with emphasis on how to avoid making them angry. I want every cadet in the Academy to understand that if humans ever achieve interstellar travel capability— Admiral, Glub interrupted politely, according to the most recent intelligence, they're already planning their first interstellar colony ship. Launch date is scheduled for 18 months from now. The holographic projection of Admiral Zorth flickered and went dark. A moment later, alarms began sounding throughout the Academy as the facility went to emergency status. Commander Vex looked at his 3 remaining cadets with a mixture of professional pride and existential terror. Well, class, it appears we're about to make first contact with a species that considers warfare to be both an art form and a restraint exercise. Glubb raised his hand. Commander, should we be preparing for invasion? No, Cadet Glubb. We should be preparing to make sure they like us enough not to show us what total war looks like. Flux's energy form suddenly brightened to its original cheerful yellow. You know what, Commander? I think I want to transfer to the diplomatic corps after all. If humans are joining galactic civilization, somebody needs to make sure we're on their good side. Excellent thinking, Cadet Flux. Hewick stood up from his seat. Commander, I have a question. What do you think humans will want to study when they enroll in Galactic Military Academy? Commander Vex stared at the empty classroom, then at the withdrawal force still piling up on his desk, then back at his remaining students. Advanced alien warfare techniques, probably, and knowing humans, they'll probably want to improve them. Outside the classroom, the Academy's emergency sirens continued to wail as staff members began frantically rewriting curricula and preparing for the most challenging first contact scenario in galactic history. The age of human expansion was about to begin, and nobody was quite sure whether that was the most exciting or terrifying development in the history of the galaxy. Possibly both.